Ambassador Fischer, are the Germans as optimistic as the French?
Aha! This is a philosophical question that is hard to answer. But in this case, on this issue, 100% yes. So, I think you said just wishful thinking. Just wishful thinking. If we have only wishful thinking. Without hope, we don't have anything. And as diplomats, of course, we know that hope is not enough. We really need diligent work. We need patience. But we also all know from our own lives, in Germany, we have this word black pedagogy, which means you learn only when you've experienced some damage, some pain. So not to touch a hot plate because you burned yourself. If the world cannot afford to do that with the issues of health, security, justice, and sustainability, we have to make the adjustments before the damage comes in. Otherwise, it will be too late. So I'm very much an optimist on all this because what I was trying to say, we all know that as humans, we are able to learn by realizing what needs to be done, not just experiencing the pain. And we do have some hopeful signs. In the European Union, we've done some steps that really show that we've understood we need to be bold as we emerge from this crisis. One is we have the European Green Deal. The EU is committed to be climate neutral by 2050, the first continent. That's a big deal, a bold step and a bold goal. And for a long time, we had different, issues in formulating this, but we did it. And another one is something that France and Germany are leading on. President Macron and Chancellor Merkel proposed an aid fund, a European aid fund financed by 500 billion euros through joint debt issuance. So the European Union jointly issues bonds on the market. It's as if the UAE would jointly issue bonds with Saudi and Oman, or Singapore would issue bonds with Malaysia and Indonesia. If you reflect on that, it's a bold step, and it was long discussed, and our two leaders have now suggested it. We're also going to improve. We had some experiences, as Kamal said, we have to learn from our mistakes. When the crisis hit, we tended to deal with our own case first and close our borders. We even limited the export of medical goods and PPE. And now we're learning from that to set up a system that when another crisis hits, we will share that equipment. And just to add on to what Ludovic said, in international relations, we can't have that if we have disagreements, that the only two policy options are sanctions and a refusal to talk. There has to be another avenue. And I'm optimistic that we will find that.
Optimism is certainly the only way forward. Ambassador Vaswani, how's your level of optimism?
Yeah, I think as an individual, I am hopeful. As an individual, I'd like to be optimistic. But as a foreign service officer, I am a realist. And Singapore, as a small country, one of the tenets of our foreign policy is that we take the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. So I think the shared challenges of the global pandemic, there are a lot of common interests at play. I think there's certainly a basis for cooperation. There's also a humanitarian impetus for this. This is useful and important and will certainly forge some trust. But at the same time, we have to be realistic that it's not going to erase disagreements over very intractable issues. But again, to go back to Peter's point, and I think it's an important one, for us as diplomats, you can forge two paths. You can disagree and you can agree at the same time, you know, and I can cooperate on 100 things and I can disagree on a few others. They don't have to be interlinked. Not everything has to be a zero-sum game. Sometimes you can have win-win, and sometimes the other person, helping another person, is in your self-interest as well. And I think going forward, again, I think it's sounding to sound a little bit repetitive, and I think it goes back again to multilateralism and the need to work together to deal with what is a very global issue. And COVID-19 has reminded us that we are all interconnected. And I think what Ludovic said, I think in some of these issues, we shouldn't bring politics into play. It is a humanitarian issue, it's a health issue, and we should let the cooperation proceed on its own steam. If you happen to have spin-off benefits, I think we should consider ourselves fortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And on that note, I think the pandemic represents a global crisis, and it's clear that it hasn't affected everyone equally as well. I want to talk a little bit about the lesser fortunate segments of society. We're seeing different individuals and communities handling their most vulnerable populations in different manners, and obviously a lot of it has to do to their own capabilities to manage these situations. If I may ask Ambassador Fischer, how do you believe the respective culture of your country has shaped efforts to help those that are struggling the most?
Yeah, there's a question of culture, but I believe in most cultures there is a culture of helping those that are in need, that are weak, that are suffering. I can't really think of a culture that doesn't incorporate that. Yeah, but there's different governmental and social systems. And I said initially, countries with a social cohesiveness have reaped some benefits during this crisis. And on that question, maybe I can just explain to you a little bit about Germany. Our constitution says we have three constitutional elements. We're a federal state, so like the UAE, we're composed of different states, you say emirates. We're a democratic state, that's our system of government. And the third thing, and few people know this about the German constitution, we are a social state. That means there is a constitutional requirement to help those that are in need. We call it social market economy. We believe in the market, the efficiency of the market, but we have a constitutional requirement to balance the market with measures to help those that are not succeeding in the market for whatever reason. And we have a permanent discussion. Do we have too much social or too much market? And sometimes a government comes in and says, the previous government did too much social, we need more market now. Lower the taxes, lower the regulation. Then the next one comes in and says, raise the taxes, do more government activity, have more regulation to protect people. But we keep a balance in the middle. And in this crisis, our system, I think, has worked well. Our stimulus and relief packages included cash for families, cash for children, unemployment benefits, cash for self-employed and for artists. We reduced the value-added tax by 3 percentage points until the end of the year. It's good for everyone. And a very important scheme that we have is called short-term work. So companies can reduce the working time of their employees, let's say in a car factory, less demand. So they say, okay, your work is reduced by half. And the government will cover 70 to 80% of the wage bill for the company. That way, the company can reduce its work, but hold on to its people. The people get a paycheck, and when demand comes back, the company is ready to go with its own workforce, with its proven workforce. So I think this social element is very important. And if we look around the world, and again, I won't hesitate to be slightly political. The countries that have been preaching maximum economic efficiency and criticizing countries like Germany for having some social expenses and social redundancies, they're unfortunately seeing the downside of not having what we call a social safety net in this kind of a situation. People lose their work, people lose their health care, and there's no system to look after them. That's not a good situation.
Very challenging indeed, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Ambassador Pouille, how has France dealt with this segment of society?
What strikes me is that the French people have globally reacted as one nation. French people like to argue regularly, but there was really a common sense of solidarity and of responsibility in facing this crisis. Since 1945, the creation of the so-called Sécurité sociale, the French social security, the French people are very deeply attached to the quality of the universal French healthcare system. It's like in Germany, we have a social state. It was founded on values of solidarity and wealth redistribution. And the French government has taken, like in Germany, many measures right after the beginning of the pandemic, during the lockdown, to help companies, to help families, vulnerables. And this has been, of course, this is costly, but this was necessary to avoid a complete social collapse of the French society. And we think it's absolutely essential to prepare for the next step, prepare for the recovery of the economy, and to maintain a stable society, which is the main challenge, I would say, after the pandemics for many countries in the world. I want to add also that we were all very much surprised of the spontaneity of some initiatives. We have seen, of course, the courage, the dedication of the medical staff, all the people at the front line, but many citizens have also decided to provide their individual support. Many different ways. For instance, we had some French citizens cooking hot meals for the medical staff. We have seen students look out for the elderly neighbors. We have seen also musician artists perform live music on the social media for free. We have seen many companies also, like Decathlon, Air Liquide, LVMH, and others. They shifted their industries towards manufacturing protective equipment, masks, blues, sanitizers. And finally, France is also a startup nation. We have the very rich startup network, and many tech entrepreneurs came up with innovative platform solutions to help create new bonds of solidarity. And I think this has to stay. Need such energy and dynamism from the society. Of course, the state will be at the core of the recovery efforts, but we will need the efforts of everybody, and everyone will be responsible.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Vaswani, when talking about the less privileged communities, I remember the conversation that we had. God, was it this morning or last night? I'm losing track of time in this quarantine situation. You shared an impressive video of your prime minister, and I was quite impressed at the level of measures and professionalism that your country has been dealing with when it comes to workers, which I believe present quite a challenge for a lot of the countries.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start off with Singapore as a nation. We're relatively young, 55 years old. Peter served in Singapore when he was a little bit younger. And we're still forging that sense of national identity. We have a pledge that we talk about regardless of race, language, religion. And benefits earlier. I talked about the various grants, the money that is being put out there, the 100 billion Singapore dollars. So that's the whole of government approach. But I think there's a lot of things that is happening at the societal level. So I would call this a whole of society approach, people coming together. Ludovic talked about startups. And again, and I'm reminded of some of the tech things that people have been developing apps to deal with different situations. At the same time, there's a group of people who are not on the digital grid, who have been left out. And we have these small and small hawker centers, where you can get very good local food. Peter was telling me earlier he misses Hokkien mee from Singapore, which is a local dish made at a hawker stall. And a lot of these people with social distancing, with people not being able to go out, they've not been able to sell their wares. Normally it's word of mouth as well. So you've had volunteers who've come up, who've created platforms to help digitize these businesses so that they can advertise, that they can, get on the online services as well. And again, this is all voluntary, it's from the ground up. We had some of our foreign workers, you talked about it. Again, a lot of people have sort of understood the contributions that the foreign workers have made to modern Singapore and ground up initiatives to medical kits, all sorts of daily necessities for them. And our PM has, and you rightly pointed out, our PM came out to say that they will get the same level of medical treatment as locals because they have made massive contributions. And one interesting ground up initiative was this girl. We have a number of foreign workers from South Asia, and some of them speak Bengali. It's a language not commonly spoken in Singapore. So what she did on her own initiative, she and her family, she's of Bengali origin, she created a website to help translate basic phrases, to help the frontline workers communicate with the Bengali patients. Then there are many other stories, people who've been coming out to, and I think this is a point that I think it was Ludovic or Peter, I can't recall, an appreciation for nurses, for other healthcare professionals, for the cleaners as well. And I think this is going to make us better as a nation. And people have come out, like voluntary driving services for the healthcare workers. A lot of people are buying food and sending it to the hospitals as well. And it's, I contend that for a young nation like Singapore, COVID-19 has helped to reinforce the sense of self-identity. It has brought us closer together as a nation. And maybe out of adversity, something good comes out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm conscious of the time, and so I will ask one last question, if I may, which is very close to my heart, diplomacy and communications. I want to know and take a look at the role of diplomacy and communications in this crisis. Have you found that your roles have changed with this pandemic as we go through this crisis? Being representatives of your governments in such a dynamic and uncertain situation, is there anything you have learned that will change the way you operate after the pandemic subsides? I'm curious about your personal answers, perhaps. Ambassador Pouille?
Yes. Well, I have to confess that for a diplomat, social distancing is not very easy. Our daily work, is to meet people, to visit, our institutions, our partners, and I miss personally a lot my visits to Line, Sharjah, Dubai, the French schools, the French alliances, of course, Sorbonne Abu Dhabi, the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and I really hope that we will be able to go back very soon, to those loved places. And I really hope that the pandemics will not change radically our methods, of work and our social life. But of course, we have completely reshuffled our daily work at the embassy. Nothing was really improvised because we had the contingency plans. So we knew in advance how to reorganize our work. We have established a special task force in the embassy in March in a few hours with a special hotline for the French community in the UAE, and also the 15,000 French citizens who were stranded in the UAE. They were tourists happy to be here, and they were blocked because there were no airlines. And so we have worked tirelessly for days and weeks together with the UAE authorities, I think, to help the repatriation of those citizens. I think that this crisis has shed a new light also on the great dedication of and the hidden skills and talents of the diplomatic and consular staff. I was very lucky to have in my team colleagues with previous experiences in some of the most difficult crises, either pandemics or earthquakes. And we were able to manage the crisis with great calm and professionalism, which is, of course, very important when you have a community of 30,000 French citizens to manage. Of course, crisis management is also about communication. You mentioned in the beginning that we were all three communicators. We try to be, I want to say. It's always a challenge because in the current world, communication has to be very well, I would say, controlled. And we are facing, many disinformation, fake news and other. So we have to be very cautious. But our priority was to keep our fellow citizens in the UAE informed of the evolution of the situation, ask them, of course, to comply with the regulations and the instructions given by the Emirati authorities. We had also to quickly identify those of our citizens who were stranded after the closing of borders, but also those who were vulnerable in order to bring some assistance. So, in a nutshell, I would say internally for the embassy, if I may take three takeaways from the crisis. First, be prepared before things get bad. Second, work as a team and make the most of your staff's skills and talents. And three, communication, communication, and communication. Good communication. And finally, if I may add a final word, I would say that despite the lockdown, despite this focus, of course, on the safety of our community, we have continued to work tirelessly with our Emirati partners to enhance our strategic partnership. We were able to reinforce our ambitious bilateral partnership for the implementation of SDGs. And last week, we had the opportunity to hold our 12th session of the strategic dialogue between France and the UAE, which was the occasion to endorse an ambitious bilateral roadmap for the next decade. So we are not just talking about what to do during the pandemics and right after the pandemics, but what we will do together, France and the UAE, between 2020 and 2030. And I'm confident that we will do things together for the benefit of the world, not only in the region, but also in Africa and elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Indeed, we're very proud of the strategic partnership we have with France. And if this pandemic has done anything, it certainly has not slowed down our ambitions, nor our agendas that are really, I think they have picked up speed and definitely not slowed down. And the same goes to our relationships with the rest of our allies and our guests here. Ambassador Fischer, what has changed for you here?
I think all the conclusions are still preliminary, but I think we can already see some trends emerging. And like Ludovic, I would agree, diplomacy is the art of bringing people together and being together with people. So the distancing is a limitation on diplomacy. However, we have discovered that the electronic communications, the digitalization, the video conferences are a good tool and a helpful tool, as our panel today shows. And I have to say, I miss some meetings. But there are some meetings which in the future I hope will just be on the video conference rather than having to go there and to queue and whatnot. The German Foreign Ministry was, we discovered some deficits in our IT. We actually had a poll, and people said, what did not work well in the crisis? And a number of things worked pretty well. I would say especially our people, our teamwork was good. But 100% of the respondents said our IT was not quite where it should be. And so now, Kamal is probably laughing about this, and maybe Hend, you are too. Now our ministry is rolling out a 3-year program to make every workplace for Germany-based and local employees also a workplace that is remotely possible from at home. And we're switching from a demand-based system where you used to say, have to explain, this is why I need remote working. I mean, I have it, and I'm well equipped as an ambassador, but many people in the embassy that should have it don't, to a personnel based. So if you're personnel, you will get this opportunity, but it'll take 3 years to roll out. And that's the one thing. And then, we're also witnessing a competition of the narratives in this crisis. There's 2 or 3 of them floating around, and people are going to great lengths to bring their narrative across. And I think our panel today showed that, yes, we're also promoting our narrative. But our narrative is not that we did everything right, but that we're in this together, we need to learn from this together, and we need to work together on the basis of a fair and true partnership with all willing partners, that's the way forward. I think that's a powerful narrative, and I think it will do well in the competition of narratives.
Very insightful, Ambassador. Very insightful. Thank you very much. Ambassador Vaswani?
I'm in an interesting situation. I came here in February, right? Smack this.
You just didn't see anybody yet. Yeah, you haven't met anyone. So a lot has changed for you, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I came here excited. I had a lot of things on my agenda. I had the Dubai Expo. I had a whole series of ideas, a whole series of meetings lined up. And as my colleagues have mentioned, the nature of diplomacy, you want to meet people. You want to look people in the eye. You want to look at body language. You want to see the nuances. You want to sense the nuances. But, well, we couldn't. And then they offered me the first virtual presentation of credentials. And I thought, this is cool. So we did it. And I'm very grateful to the ministry for organizing that. I was hopeful that things would ease up a little bit during Eid, that maybe I could go for some of these, the iftars before and some of the events during, but that was not to be the case. So I figured rather than waiting, my challenge is that I don't have this diplomatic capital established in advance. Ludovic and Peter have met people over the past year, I guess, or 2. And you know people personally, and it's easier to build that chemistry, to bring that chemistry online. You're meeting with someone you've met in the past. So for me, well, I don't have that option. So let's dive in straight. And I put in my TPNs to MOFA. I said, let's have video calls instead. And I'm reaching out. We've had good conversations. I've had a whole series of video meetings. Some of it I would have preferred to meet in person, but I see this as a way of teeing up an interaction. And then we can meet in person in the future. With Dubai, I thought it was pretty cool. I met Dewa, I met RTA, and I looked in my colleague from Dubai. We had really good conversation. I looked in our Enterprise Singapore colleagues to follow up on the business. So like Peter mentioned, maybe going forward, some meetings I will say, let's prioritize. Some meetings I need to meet in person. And some meetings, maybe let's keep up the video interactions. At the end of it, as a diplomat, our job is to build bridges, to find opportunity. And I can do it in person, I can do it through video. But that day, a colleague from the diplomatic community invited me for lunch, and we sat opposite each other at the table. We had a meal, a glass of wine. It was nice, It felt talking over video is awesome, But meeting in person, having that banter, it's convivial. But that's not an option at this point in time. So we will deal with video. I'm also meeting, I also want to engage my fellow Singaporeans. National Day receptions are a bit tough at this point in time. So I'm reaching out through them by video as well. Have a conversation. Alongside with them, my thumbs are really tired. I've been WhatsApping a lot, I've been saying hello. I think that's how I said hello to you as well. I got your contact, I reached out, I said hi, and then we sort of kept up. I forwarded stuff and we kept up contact as well. We've worked the phones, I've picked up the phone, had lots of phone conversations. And it can be done. At the end about it, like I said, COVID is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. We are in it for the long haul, and I think we have to work around it. We have to find creative solutions, and we will thrive. Yeah, new opportunities will come up. And one final point: a lot of people are interested in knowing what's happening in Singapore. And ironically, COVID, how we're dealing with COVID, gave me a story to share, to talk about. And maybe it incentivized them to pick up the phone and talk to me. So, in adversity, we find opportunity. Thank you.
That's right. That's right. Thank you very much, ambassadors. You packed a lot, truly. And I think some of the main themes we've covered are the necessity of being prepared, the necessity of being adaptable, and the key importance of multilateralism. So thank you again very much. I hope that we will get to see you again very soon. Appreciate the generosity of your time. And stay safe, keep well.